Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are cracking open a file that feels like well, honestly, it feels like a collision between a domestic sitcom and a physics textbook.
Yeah, and maybe a little bit of a ghost story thrown in there, too.
Yeah, exactly, a ghost story. It is one of those rare moments where the entirely mundane, everyday life meets the metaphysical in a way that is just fascinating.
It really is a unique combination.
Yeah.
We were looking at a very specific slice of time today. We're diving into session 269 of the early sessions, book 6 of the Seth Material.
And the date of record on that is June 20, 1966.
Right, June 20, 1966.
So I want you, the listener, to kind of picture the scene with us. It's the swinging 60s. We are in Elmira, New York, inside the apartment of the scribe, and the medium things are a little bit tense.
Just a little bit, yeah.
And before we get into the reasons why the vibe is so off in that apartment, I do need to make our mandatory declaration. This deep dive is distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. We are just here to learn. We are not here to sell you a mattress or a meal kit or anything like that.
Precisely. We are here for the data. And our mission today is to unpack a session that covers 3 distinct but surprisingly connected areas. First, we have what I kind of like to call the birthday paradox.
Oh, the birthday paradox is so relatable.
It really is. It's all about how our subconscious mind can literally drag people into our lives even when we consciously think we just want to be left completely alone.
Which is actually a little terrifying when you think about it.
It is a bit unsettling, yeah. And then second, we have essentially masterclass on lucid dreaming, or what the source material calls awake-seeming dreams.
Awake-seeming dreams, yes.
And third, and this is the part that really blew my mind when I first read it, the actual physics and the physical chemistry of ghosts. We aren't talking about, spooky sheets floating around. We are talking about actual electromagnetic reality.
Yeah, it is incredibly dense material, but it is so rewarding to get through. We should also right up front credit the publisher New Awareness Network for preserving these sessions and keeping them available to us.
Yes, absolutely.
And I actually have a quote I want to use to kick us off, just to set the tone for the depth we are about to hit today. It goes, all consciousness exists first and primarily in electromagnetic terms, although consciousness may project itself into many various forms. It is never completely imprisoned within those forms, however.
It is never completely imprisoned. I love that phrasing.
It's powerful, right?
It sets the stage perfectly because in this session, the scribe of these notes is feeling, well, a little bit imprisoned himself.
Yeah, but not by his physical body.
No, by social obligations.
Yeah.
Which we've all been there.
Oh, completely. Let's set the scene for the listener. So it's June 20, 1966. It happens to be the scribe's 47th birthday.
Happy birthday to him.
Right. And the medium is 38 at the time. Now, the scribe has a very, very specific plan for his birthday evening. Do you want to guess what it is?
He wants to be left the heck alone.
Exactly, which honestly is the most relatable 47th birthday wish I've ever heard in my life.
I mean, who doesn't want that?
Right. He just wants to work on his art. He wants the medium to be able to work on her writing. He wants a quiet, productive evening. He does not want cake. He does not want a party. He just wants total silence.
But of course, that is exactly what does not happen.
Not even close. It is a disaster of interruptions. It's like a revolving door at their apartment. First 2 friends just show up totally uninvited.
Oh, right.
Then a single friend drops by. Then after that, a group of 3 more people. Total chaos. The medium gets absolutely zero work done because she suddenly has to play hostess to all these people.
And the scribe is just annoyed.
He is beyond annoyed. He's watching the clock. And to top it all off, one of the guests is a coworker of his who casually drops a pretty massive bomb.
Oh, this part is just physically painful to read.
It really is. The coworker just casually mentions that the office completely forgot it was his birthday today. Yeah, they actually planned a party for him for tomorrow because they got the date wrong. They forgot the actual day of his birth.
That is just brutal.
So he is sitting there stewing in his own juices, probably faking a polite smile, while these unwanted guests eat his snacks, knowing full well that his real celebration was totally forgotten by his colleagues.
And this is exactly where the source enters the picture. The session itself starts that evening around 9 p.m. after everyone finally clears out of the apartment. And the source speaking through the medium is in a very, very cheeky mood.
Oh, he is absolutely roasting the scribe. He is not letting him off the hook at all.
Not even a little bit. The session starts off with this great line, "I hereby offer you sincere congratulations upon your birthday." But then it immediately pivots to analyzing the absolute train wreck of the afternoon.
This is where we get into that birthday paradox you mentioned.
Right. So the source explains that the scribe's conscious desire to be alone was completely and totally overruled by his subconscious desire to be celebrated.
Okay, wait. So, let's unpack this for a second because it's important. He is consciously thinking, I want to be alone, I want to paint, but subconsciously he is essentially shouting, pay attention to me.
Exactly. He was hurt that his coworkers forgot him. That hurt turned into anger. And the material explains that anger is a highly potent generator of energy.
So it's not just a private feeling you have in your head.
No, it's a broadcast signal. It's an energy emission. The source actually says the medium was so concerned that the coworkers did not hold a party that she sent out messages. And as for the scribe, his anger generated energies that found immediate outlet, pulling people to the apartment.
That is wild. So they basically telepathically summoned these random friends.
In a manner of speaking, yes. The raw energy of that suppressed anger and that desperate subconscious desire for validation acted like a giant magnet. He pulled them to the apartment to fill that void.
But then it backfired.
Completely. The source points out the irony, saying that of course he came to nothing because he would not disturb you, meaning the guests arrived to fulfill the subconscious pull, but the scribe's conscious ego was too grumpy to actually enjoy the attention.
So the subconscious need wasn't even met in the end.
Right, because the ego was just annoyed that the painting time was ruined.
It's a textbook case of be careful what you wish for, or I guess more accurately, be careful what you are secretly mad about.
It really is a profound lesson in how we actually go about creating our reality, because we tend to think our reality is shaped by our conscious plans, right? Like, I plan to sit on the couch tonight, so that is my reality.
But the reality is actually shaped by the strongest emotional charge.
Precisely. His strongest charge wasn't, I want to paint. His strongest charge was, I'm being ignored and I'm mad about it. So the universe, or the underlying mechanics of reality, sent 6 people to his door to ensure he wasn't ignored.
Which paradoxically just made him miserable.
Because the self is not a monolith. You have the ego, which is the logical day-to-day planner, and you have the inner self, or the subconscious, which deals in raw energy and raw emotion.
And if those two aren't aligned, you get a chaotic birthday party.
You get a very chaotic birthday party. The source even calls it an amusing demonstration. It's looking at this guy's miserable afternoon as a fun little laboratory experiment in human psychology.
So what does this mean for you, the listener? It means if you keep having bad luck or constant interruptions in your life, you might really need to check what kind of signal you're broadcasting underneath the surface.
Exactly. You might be screaming for attention on a frequency that you aren't even consciously listening to yourself.
Okay, so once the domestic comedy of the birthday party is sort of settled and analyzed, the session pivots to something much, much trippier. It starts talking about dreams.
But not just your run-of-the-mill normal dreams. It calls them awake-seeming dreams.
Right, which we would just call lucid dreaming today. But the breakdown here is highly technical. It's not just, oh, I knew I was dreaming and I flew around a bit.
No, the material distinguishes very clearly between a dream that is merely vivid and a truly awake dream.
So what is the core difference there, based on the text?
The defining difference is the active presence of the critical faculties.
The critical faculties, meaning that part of our brain that usually says, wait a minute, elephants don't fly, or I shouldn't be giving a presentation in my underwear.
Correct. Under normal circumstances, the ego and its critical faculties are dormant during sleep. We just accept the bizarre dream reality without question. We float along with whatever the narrative is.
But the goal here is different.
The goal is to bring those critical faculties actively into the dream state without accidentally waking up the physical body.
Which begs the question, why do we want to do that? Isn't the whole point of sleep to get a break from that critical nagging part of our brain?
You would certainly think so. But the argument here is that bringing the ego along for the ride allows for a massive expansion of identity. The text breaks it down, saying, you will be able to realize that while you are indeed awake as you seem, you are awake within a different condition.
That's that light bulb moment.
Exactly. You realize that your physical self is sleeping soundly in a bed somewhere, but your inner self is fully awake right here in this environment.
Standing in a dream landscape, looking down at your hands and knowing, my body is in bed right now, but I am here. The I is here.
And achieving that realization triggers a huge influx of energy. The session mentions it brings a real sense of exhilaration and an added depth or dimension to the experience.
So it goes from being a flat, two-dimensional movie that you're just passively watching to a multi-dimensional environment that you can actively interact with.
Yes. And you can manipulate the conditions. You go from being a victim of the dream script to being the director of the scene.
But more importantly than just flying around, it opens up a direct line of communication between the ego and the inner self, doesn't it?
It does. Usually those two aspects of identity are separated by the thick barrier of sleep. The ego takes the day shift, the inner self takes the night shift.
They never see each other.
Right. But if you can wake up the ego inside the inner self's domain, they can actually talk. They can exchange data directly. It's bridging two halves of your personality that usually never meet face to face.
I do like how the source warns that this takes competence, though. It's not just a free-for-all playground.
No, it takes a good deal of training. Because once you are lucid in that space, the environment is instantly responsive to your thoughts.
So if you panic, the environment panics.
Exactly. If you get scared, a monster appears. You have to maintain that delicate balance of knowing you are awake without getting so excited or terrified that you snap back into the physical body and wake up in bed.
It's fascinating that the material links this directly to projection, too. It explicitly states that almost all of your dream experiences do involve projection of one kind or another.
Which is the perfect segue to the next section of the session, because this is where the science, or at least the physics, according to this material, gets really heavy.
Yeah, this was the part that just completely hooked me. Because normally when we hear about astral projection or we talk about ghosts or apparitions, we immediately think of the spiritual realm. We think ethereal realm. We think ethereal.
But the source material says no. It says it has chemicals.
Ghosts have chemicals. That sounds like the title of a cheesy 1950s sci-fi B-movie, The Chemical Ghost.
It really does.
Yeah.
But when you look at the implications, it's staggering. The text states very clearly there are chemical changes that occur within the physical body when projections occur. The projected form is a kind of pseudo-image, materialistically speaking, but it have definite electromagnetic reality and chemical properties.
So it's saying that an apparition or a ghost isn't just a hallucination that exists only in the viewer's mind. It is an actual structure occupying physical space in the room.
Yes, it uses this brilliant cloud analogy to help visualize it.
Walk us through the cloud analogy, because that really helped it click for me.
The source says the chemical composition of a storm will give you an idea of what it means. As a rule, these projected forms are not solid, in the same way that clouds are not solid. And yet they have shape and, to a certain extent, boundaries and, of course, movement.
So a ghost or a projected consciousness is basically like a localized storm system of energy?
Exactly. It's diffuse. You can probably walk right through it, just like you can walk through a patch of thick fog. But it is chemically and physically present.
It even says there is an atomic structure, right?
It does. It notes that there is an atomic structure, though in some ways the structure is less complete than a typical physical form like a chair or a table.
And this all connects back to the actual physical body of the person who's projecting, doesn't it? Like if I leave my body to go visit a friend on the other side of town, my physical body sleeping in my bed is actually paying a biological price for that trip.
Price might be a slightly strong word, but there's a measurable cost. The text notes that there is always a minute difference in the physical body's normal weight when the individual is projecting.
We actually lose weight. Finally, a diet plan I can fully endorse. The astral projection diet.
I wouldn't cancel your gym membership just yet. It says a minute difference. But the mechanism behind that weight loss is fascinating.
Right, because it's using the body's resources.
Yes. The excess chemicals built up during the waking condition are actively used to help form these projecting images.
So your physical body is essentially acting like a battery or a chemical reservoir.
Precisely. When you project your consciousness, you are literally siphoning off some of your body's chemical and electromagnetic potency to construct this cloud form in another location.
Which completely explains why people who have intense out-of-body experiences often report feeling absolutely exhausted when they wake up.
Because they aren't just mentally tired from a wild dream. They're physically and chemically depleted. They used up their reserves to build a temporary body.
And this also brilliantly explains the animal connection. I've always wondered why dogs will randomly bark at an empty corner of the ceiling, or cats will just sit and stare intensely at nothing.
The material addresses that directly. It says animals have indeed sensed such apparitions, and there is hardly any magic involved.
No magic. They are just reacting to the chemical properties of the apparition.
Right. The dog isn't seeing a demon from the underworld. The dog is smelling a localized chemical disturbance in the living room.
It's like how animals can smell the ozone in the air right before a thunderstorm hits.
That is the perfect analogy. Since the apparition is essentially a storm or a cloud of electromagnetic disturbance, It makes total logical sense that an animal with highly tuned senses would detect that shift in the atmosphere long before a human would ever notice it.
It completely demystifies the paranormal. It grounds it entirely in physics. It's not supernatural at all. It's just natural physics that our current instruments haven't quite mapped out yet.
And that is the underlying stance of this entire body of work. There is no supernatural. Everything is natural, but our definition of what constitutes nature is just way too small.
Okay, so we established, based on the text, that we can leave our physical bodies and that we build these pseudoforms out of our own chemicals and electromagnetism. But this raises a massive philosophical question.
The question of identity.
Right. Who is the I that is doing the projecting? If I leave my body, who am I?
And now we enter the deep waters of this session, the concept of the moment point.
This part honestly made my brain hurt a little bit, but in a really good way. The source simply states identity is not dependent upon physical existence.
Yeah, which logically follows.
Yeah.
If you can build a form out of chemicals and leave your body, then you are clearly not the body. You are the architect operating the body.
The body is just a biological suit.
A vehicle, yes.
Yeah.
The material explains that our true fundamental existence is electromagnetic. It says electromagnetic reality belongs to the inner self, and it is never completely imprisoned within those physical forms.
So why do we even need the physical vehicle then? What's the point of the meat suit?
The session explains that as physical beings, your perception is slowed down to a necessary but very extensive degree.
Slow down. So reality is inherently moving at light speed, and we are just dragging along at 5 miles per hour.
Essentially, yes. The inner self exists outside of our linear time. To the soul, an entire human lifetime is referred to in the text as just a moment point.
A whole entire 80-year lifetime is just a single moment.
To the inner self, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine holding a reel of a movie. You hold the entire story in your hands all at once. The beginning, the middle, and the end are all right there.
But to actually watch it and experience the story, you have to thread it through a projector and slow it down frame by frame.
Exactly. The material says we slow down our perception to experience what it calls value fulfillment. We are exploring the inner contents of a single moment, delving into its experience.
So my entire life, from childhood to my career to recording this deep dive with you, is really just my soul taking one single moment of its existence and stretching it out so I can look at every tiny detail.
That is the profound implication here. The ego, your conscious mind, is the highly specialized tool designed specifically to handle this slowed-down frame-by-frame perception.
But the inner self isn't trapped in that slow motion.
No. Which is why when we dream or when we project, we can leap out of the ego's time limitations. We reconnect with that broader electromagnetic reality.
It completely changes how you view the concept of death, doesn't it?
Completely. The session explicitly states that the survival of the human personality is not dependent upon physical survival. The electromagnetic properties simply revert to their original source with the inner self.
You just return to the source. The chemical cloud dissipates and the water droplet returns to the ocean.
But the crucial part is that the identity remains intact. The you that experienced the moment point keeps the knowledge of that experience. You don't get erased.
That's heavy. It's heavy, but it's incredibly hopeful.
It is deeply hopeful. But the source material being what it is doesn't let them float up in the philosophical clouds for too long. It brings them right back down to earth with a practical test.
Yes, the envelope experiment. I love looking at these old ESP tests because they're always so messy and human.
They are. And this particular one is a classic example of what you might call a partial success or maybe an interesting failure.
So let's lay out the setup for the listener. The scribe has hidden a specific object inside a double envelope. The medium goes into her trance state and tries to psychically guess what the hidden object is.
Right. And the physical object itself is a square of cream-colored burlap. The scribe had glued it to a small wood panel using white gesso, which is like an art primer.
And he trimmed the edges of the burlap using a sharp razor blade.
Okay, so the target is burlap wood glue and razor cuts.
Now, the condition of the medium is important here. She is completely exhausted. It's late. She's been smoking. She's tired. Her eyes are actually open during this trance state.
And she starts receiving impressions and saying them out loud.
And her impressions are wild. She says newspaper, she says knife, she says turbulence, murder, and a formal affair.
Which on the surface sounds like she missed the target by a country mile. Cream-colored burlap is definitely not a murder weapon.
Right, it looks like a total failure. The text even notes the results were well below par. But then the source and the scribe do this really fascinating forensic analysis of exactly why she was wrong.
Which is honestly more instructive than if she had just guessed burlap perfectly on the first try.
Because there actually was a razor blade involved in making the object.
Exactly. The scribe used a razor blade to cut the burlap. So the psychic concept of knife or sharp was absolutely correct. She hit that target.
And what about the newspaper?
He used old newspapers on his desk to protect the surface while he was gluing the burlap. So newspaper was physically present at the creation of the object. She hit that target too.
So she got sharp blade and she got paper. Where did the murder and turbulence come from?
This is where the wires got crossed. Her tired brain took that raw psychic data razor and newspaper, and her associative mind just jumped in and took over.
How so?
She had read a very disturbing story in the local newspaper that exact same day about a woman being murdered with a knife.
Oh, wow. So she receives the purest signal, sharp blade plus newspaper, and her exhausted physical brain auto-completes the pattern to match the emotional story she read earlier that day.
Precisely. The text explains that the newspaper connection was correct and the sharpness, but his own associations operated though he did not realize it. The source refers to this as static.
Static on the line.
When the psychic channel is physically tired, the subconscious mind inevitably fills in the blanks with its own recent memories or its own latent fears.
It's exactly like trying to listen to a slightly broken radio. You can hear the actual song playing, but you're also hearing the interference from the talk radio station next door bleeding over.
That's a great way to put it. And there's this really funny minor detail in the transcript about the word smidgen.
Oh yeah, the medium uses the word smidgen during the trance to describe something. And later when she's awake, she adamantly claims she never ever uses that word in real life.
It just shows that even deep in a trance state, the vocabulary can be drawn from strange, eclectic corners of the mind. But the absolute key takeaway from this experiment is the heavily associative nature of all psychic work.
It's rarely a clear, high-definition video feed playing in the mind.
Almost never. It is a stream of raw symbols and raw feelings that the receiver's brain then has to interpret and translate into words. And physical exhaustion severely messes up that translation process.
The source actually defends her performance, doesn't it?
It does. It says she was simply exhausted and that the object did not have sufficient emotional connections to offset his exhaustion.
Which implies that if the hidden object had been something deeply emotionally resonant, like a lost wedding ring or a child's favorite toy, she might have been able to push through the fatigue and get a clearer read.
But a random piece of burlap glued to wood. Her tired brain just couldn't lock onto the signal strongly enough.
I find that incredibly comforting, actually. It shows that even the so-called pros have bad days. It makes the whole metaphysical process feel much more human and biological.
It absolutely validates the process as a biological, psychological skill set, rather than just mystical magic. It has physical variables.
Fatigue affects it. Mood affects it.
Just like playing a complex piece on the piano or running a marathon, your physical state dictates your performance.
So we have really covered a massive amount of ground today. From unwanted telepathic birthday parties to the chemical composition of ghosts to a failed burlap ESP experiment.
It is a remarkably wide-ranging single session.
If we step back and look at this material holistically, what do you think is the main thread connecting all these seemingly disparate segments?
I think the absolute core thread running through all of it is the undeniable power and the primary reality of the inner self.
How so? Break that down.
Well, look at the birthday party. The inner self's emotional desire for attention completely overrode the ego's logical plan to paint. Look at the lucid dreaming segment. The entire goal is to wake up the ego to the inner self's broader reality.
Right, and the ghosts.
They are literal electromagnetic projections fueled by the inner self's energy. And the moment point philosophy shows that the inner self is the true timeless entity that is merely experiencing this physical moment.
And even the failed envelope experiment was just the inner self's clear signal getting garbled by the physical brain's exhaustion.
Exactly. The ultimate lesson here is that we are multidimensional beings. We go through life treating this physical world as the one true real world. But this material continually flips the script on us.
It's saying the physical world is just the end result.
Yes, the cause is always energetic, it's always emotional, and it's always internal.
That really is the deep dive right there. We are living our lives from the inside out, even when we are entirely convinced we are living from the outside in.
All consciousness exists first and primarily in electromagnetic terms. That is the bottom line of this entire session.
Before we wrap up, I actually want to circle back to the ghost thing one more time because the idea of the pseudo-image is really sticking with me.
It's a sticky concept for sure.
The material mentions that the atomic structure of an apparition is less complete than a normal physical form.
Yes, it does.
Does that mean ghosts are sort of inherently glitchy?
In a way, yes. Think of a hologram that flickers when the power source fluctuates, or a radio signal that fades in and out as you drive through a tunnel. Because the projected form doesn't have the dense, locked-down atomic structure of, say, a rock or a chair, it is subject to constant fluctuation. It's a fluid form.
And it is entirely driven by the focus of the person or entity projecting it, right?
Yes, which perfectly explains why apparitions are so often fleeting. Holding that level of focus, literally holding that electromagnetic storm together in a cohesive shape, requires intense energy and concentration, or it requires incredibly intense emotion.
So a classic haunting might really just be a looped recording of an intensely emotional event that just keeps replaying as a localized electromagnetic storm.
The material frequently alludes to exactly that. Some ghosts are active real-time projections of living people having out-of-body experiences, and some are just the energetic residue of past emotional events.
But the underlying mechanism of the physical chemistry and the electromagnetism is exactly the same either way.
It is. It's all just energy taking temporary form.
It really makes the world around us feel so much more populated, doesn't it?
Crowded even.
Yeah, crowded. We are just constantly surrounded by thoughts, by projections, by invisible chemical trails of emotion.
It's a powerful reminder that we leave a wake behind us as we move through the world. We are never truly isolated. Our suppressed anger pulls random people to our front door. Our physical exhaustion colors our psychic perceptions. Our dreams are actual places we visit. We are constantly interacting with a much larger environment than our basic 5 physical senses report to us.
Which ironically brings us right back to the scribe on his birthday. The poor guy just wanted a quiet night to paint.
And instead he got a house full of people and a profound lesson in the mechanics of metaphysics.
Happy birthday indeed.
A memorable one, at least.
You know, there's actually one more tiny detail about the ESP experiment I wanted to touch on before we close out. The medium got an image of white and 4 lines.
Ah, yes, I remember that. She reported seeing the color white and 4 lines, perhaps, with white between them.
And how does that fit the target?
Well, the gesso primer was white and the burlap was cream-colored. But the 4 lines part is very abstract. However, earlier in the trance, she mentioned seeing red and white squares.
Squares, like the shape of the wood panel.
Yes. It perfectly illustrates how the physical mind desperately grasps for basic geometry when it can't quite identify the target object. It tries to build the image from basic shapes.
It's essentially playing a game of mental Pictionary.
That's exactly what it is. And the conscious interpreter, the waking ego, is very often the worst player on the Pictionary team.
It's a dog. It's a house. No, wait, it's a piece of burlap covered in glue.
Exactly. The signal is pure, but the interpretation is flawed.
So synthesizing all of this, what does this actually mean for you, the listener? How do you apply a session from 1966 to your life today?
I think the practical application is threefold. 1, be brutally honest with yourself about your true feelings, because those feelings are actively creating your physical reality whether you admit them or not. If you are angry, deal with the anger, or you will end up with a house full of unwanted guests manifesting your frustration.
Check. That's highly practical.
2, pay closer attention to your dreams. Make an active effort to wake up inside them. Ask yourself during your waking day, am I dreaming right now? Build that habit, because there is an entire other level of existence and communication waiting for you in that state.
Check. That's the lucid dreaming homework.
And 3, do not be afraid of the unseen aspects of our reality. It isn't dark magic. It is just natural chemistry and physics that we don't see with the naked eye yet. It's all a natural part of our universe.
And I would add, maybe cut yourself some slack. If your intuition isn't 100% perfect all the time, you might just be tired.
Absolutely. Even the best mediums have off days when they need a nap more than they need to do an ESP test.
I want to leave you with a final provocative thought about that moment point concept we discussed. If this entire human life you are living is just a single moment that your inner self is exploring in extreme depth,
Yes.
are you rushing through it? Or are you actually looking at the details? If the whole point of being physical is to deliberately slow down and experience value fulfillment, then maybe we should all stop trying to speed everything up.
That is a beautiful thought. We are here specifically to savor the texture of time, to feel the resistance of the physical air, to even feel the annoyance of the ruined birthday party. It is all vital data for the soul.
The annoyance of the birthday party is vital data for the soul. I am definitely putting that on a t-shirt.
I would buy that t-shirt.
Well, this has been an incredibly fascinating dive into the chemistry of consciousness and the reality of ghosts.
It always is when we dig into this material.
And we really have barely scratched the surface of what is contained in these transcripts. So I have to give the call to action. Do not just take our word for it. We are just providing secondhand reporting here. You need to go to the source material yourself.
Yes, please read the source material directly, specifically in this case, the early sessions. You can find all of them at the New Awareness Network website. That URL is sethcenter.com/the early sessions.
Support the publishers who work hard to keep this invaluable stuff in print. It is deeply important work.
And remember, as you go about your day, you are the active creator of your own reality, even the chaotic parts you think you didn't consciously invite.
Especially those parts. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Goodbye.
We will catch you in the next Moment Point.